All right, welcome everyone to the planning board meeting on Monday, April 28th, at 6:02 p.m. Wayne, would you do the honors?
Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and to board members, the meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by using the Zoom login provided. Viewers can also go to the local scene.media/Duxbury for information about the programming, including the streaming and watching replays on YouTube. I do not know how many times I've read that, but it could be in the hundreds.
If you'd like, we can have somebody else do it next time. All right, first up on our agenda, we have some administrative items. The first is minutes from April 14th. The second is ZBA case 2025-04 for 30 Bay Avenue. And the third is PB administrative. I would like to pull PB administrative out separately. I will entertain the motion to approve and defer the first two, or if we want, we can break them out. So the motion either way. Why don't we do it this way? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for April 14th?
Move to approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll vote, and I don't think we have Jen online, so we'll just be the five of us, so we can just do a regular call. All those in favor of approving the minutes of April 14th?
Aye.
All those opposed, abstained, thank you, that passes. Next up, ZBA case 2024-04 30 Bay Avenue. Would we like to have any discussion, or do we have a motion to defer that to ZBA?
Oh, Ron is here.
Pardon?
And the applicants.
Oh, okay, but I guess we'll go ahead and the applicants like to talk about that, please. Yes.
And we could get on board when we go. Whatever's convenient. It'll be quick.
No, I don't have that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Paul Brogan with Seacoast Engineering in town. Along with me this evening is Mr. Joe Callahan, the owner of the property at 30 Bay Road. And for most of us who've been in town the last couple of years, there've been 3 fires on the Granite Road area, one at 3 Pine Point Place, one at 146 Granite Road, and Mr. Callahan's house at the Horseshoe of Bay Ave and Kentucky Street. So we're here this evening to respond to a referral from the zoning board to the planning board to basically reconstruct the house that the Callahans had beforehand. Pre-existing non-conforming lot, pre-existing non-conforming house on a 12,500 plus or minus square foot lot. So everything is non-conforming. The existing house is basically a mirror image of what we have on the plan that has been filed with both the zoning board. You know, you have a copy. Actually, the square footage is a little bit less with the new plan than it was with the old plan. As far as the site coverage is concerned, but we have to match the existing nonconformities of 10.7 feet on 2 sides and 7.0 feet in the rear. As most of you know, the Horseshoe is over in the Granite Road area where the new seawall is being constructed during this summer season. And the way this lot is configured, it's actually a corner lot based on Park Avenue to the left to the south side. So basically have two frontage sides and 2 side and rear sides, if you will. The existing house had a concrete open pile foundation. We will be reusing that to the maximum extent practicable to construct the new house. We're actually raising it up 6 to 12 inches based on the flood zone. We're in FEMA flood zone AE 11. The first floor will be at elevation 12.5. So again, we're just basically rebuilding the house, same footprint. The square footages are changing because of squaring off the second floor because of the way the existing house had been. Should have these. This was a 3-season course that's going to be used as a full-time municipal house. So you can see from the construction itself that we're on the same footprint. There are about 5 of the concrete piles that have to be replaced. We've already talked to conservation about that as far as the footprint in the flood hazard area, overlay district, and the Barrier Beach determination that we have to go before the Conservation Commission in 2 weeks. So that is part of their regulatory review, as we know. But again, we're just rebuilding the house, same footprint, same location. And basically just restoring what was there. And Joe, how old was the old house? About 10, 12 years?
I
2012?
renovated 9 years ago, but
9
it's
years
just
ago.
30 years.
Yeah, so the original house was 30, the updated was 9 or 10 years ago. So this will be obviously new, state of the art, and everything else that is needed, plus the energy codes and everything else that's required today for new construction, especially in the waterfront area. So again, it's just a referral from the zoning board, and we will be on their agenda on 3 weeks from Thursday night, May 22nd. So be more than happy to address any questions that anybody may have, and appreciate your support. So
Well, you
Thank
said it was a referral from the zoning board. Do you mean to the zoning board?
no, from the zoning board, 2 people for the referral, which is the normal policy, right?
So what you're saying, Paul, is that you've made an application to the zoning board.
Correct.
The zoning board then asks all the other boards for input. That's the referral you're responding,
Correct.
you're talking about. And then it goes back to the zoning board for a decision.
With the public hearing, correct.
I just wanted to clear that up.
That's it. Thank you.
Does anybody on the board have any questions?
No concerns here.
I do.
Would we like I'll entertain a motion to refer this to the ZBA. Second, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? For Mr. ZBA? Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No abstentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Take care.
All right, next up, we have A&R 2025-01 66 Seabury Point Road.
The one we asked, our council. Thank you, council here. Yes.
Yeah.
I see you will have. People do it, there is one.
I did have one suggestion that the parcel actually be labeled unbuildable.
It's kind of a no-brainer.
Wasn't on.
Doesn't need.
Right.
I haven't put it on.
So there aren't any issues, with having a landlocked, essentially a landlocked parcel?
It's a parcel, not a lot.
Yeah. Any questions for council while we have her on this?
No, and it didn't create a subdivision under the lawsuit.
I'll entertain a motion to, not endorse, I was trying to think.
To endorse the-
To endorse the A&R.
Second,
Who was the first?
Can I amend the motion?
Please.
I'd like to amend the motion to endorse it upon the designation of the unbuildable lot as in fact unbuildable on the plan as suggested by the town council.
Yes.
second,
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, extensions, nope, all right, the passes, thank you very much.
So I will put the note on the plan, bring it back, and maybe the folks at your leisure could stop by during the week. I don't know. That'd be acceptable.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Great, next up is administrative site plan review, 2025-01, 60 St. George Street. You have anybody here for that? Hi, how are you?
I don't.
Would you like, is there anything you wanted to present or talk about, or as far as the property is concerned?
No, it just, we went in front of the ZBA before and they wanted to see the parking plan. And I believe you guys have a copy of that.
Yep.
Sorry, just in time. It was locked out there.
So nothing is changing with the property. We're trying to get a special permit to do used car dealers, used cars, which has been on the property since 1949.
Right.
But the,
use has changed.
yeah, well, the certificate expired at 18, so now we need to get the actual permit granted for the property to bring used cars back to the property.
Okay, thank you. Did we have Paul look at parking lot or something like that?
Yeah, we received comments from
Yeah.
highway secretary.
Oh, that's who does it, okay. I didn't know if we had to actually have Paul take a look, you just have the highway group, okay. All right, and the highway safety committee was fine with this with a couple of suggestions. I'm not sure, have you seen that email from that?
Yes, they gave us 4 suggestions.
Okay. But those 4 suggestions that you would be able to take them up on? doing
Yes.
that? Okay. Does anybody have any on the board have any questions for that?
You know. I think the no left turn sign is good stuff left turn.
Okay, if there's no discussion, I'll entertain a motion to endorse it. Well, are we endorsing it? We're endorsing the site plan review with the parking lot. Right. I'll entertain a motion to endorse the administrative site plan review for 2025-01.
So moved.
And second.
Thank you. All right, any discussion? Nope. All right, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, seen. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, good luck.
Thank you.
Next up, we have to vote to submit the accessory dwelling unit, ADU zoning bylaw articles and MBTA convenience overlay zoning bylaw article to the select board for the 2025 special town meeting. I believe this is the last night that we'll be able to discuss this before our public hearing in May. Okay, and so tonight we are voting to accept it and then refer it to the select board and refers it back to us to hold the public hearing. Yes. Okay. All right, so would it make sense to, what would be the best thing here to have Amy talk a little bit about, just maybe focus on one and then the other?
Well, you already reviewed.
You already
reviewed, you sealed that up, so I would maybe get that vote out of the way.
I gave an ADU question.
Sure.
And I had a resident approach me the other day and say, if you have an existing non-conforming lot, you still get an ADU,
Yes, so you can get an ADU, you would need
a special permit.
a finding. Well, and yes, you're right. In Duxbury, a finding is a special permit. So, what we have suggested was that special permit requirement be taken out and it be a standard finding from the ZBA, but they would have to go to the ZBA.
Okay, and that's in here somewhere?
Yes, it should be. I don't have the ADU, and I wasn't aware that we were talking about the ADU. That should be in there. Thank you. I'll just grab one.
Because literally the only thing that I wanted was, hey, can you make it explicit? Like, you gotta go back to the ZBA to
So.
get an ADU on a non-conforming lot. I'm like, okay. Sure,
It's 12.
perfect.
Under 12, it says, said extension or alteration shall be subject to, chapter 48, section 6 and 401 of the zoning bylaw. Provided, however, that a special permit shall not be required, but a majority of the zoning board of appeals shall make a finding.
Sorry, that's fine.
And then the only other thing that's come up on ADUs was last week. An ADU, it has to do with parking, so you guys are okay. I had a town that doesn't have a transit station, so they said that, the ADU required one parking space and the Attorney General's office dinged them on that because it says that you cannot require parking if it's in a half mile of a transit station. And the Attorney General's, their argument was, what if the transit station comes in a station or something like that? So, so now we're having all of our ADUs are going to, they're gonna be exactly like yours, which is one parking spot shall be required unless the protected ADU is within a mile of transit. You guys are all set. You don't have to make the change.
All right, this is the one we've been over.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, did we actually approve it on the 14th of April? Right, so we've approved it, so now we're just voting to submit it to the select board. Do we have any other questions about it either? Okay. Entertain a motion to submit that to the select board.
Well, actually, let me just raise one thing while you're here, Amy, on this. I read something recently that there was a regulation or determination that all ADUs are classified as new construction. Is this familiar to you?
No, I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's a recently issued regulation. And so that would trigger a Title V review in all cases. That's the way it was presented.
So, DEP did come out with, specific guidelines for ADUs under Title V, so it could be in there.
Yeah.
They might have been the ones.
Mhm.
Although that isn't my understanding from going through the whole process with EOHLC. We were very involved in the implementation of the regulations.
Mhm.
And it was always stated to us that if you have a 4-bedroom system on file with the Board of Health, and you currently have 3 bedrooms, you could add an ADU without a problem.
Even a detached one?
It's because
Because
it's
you got
it's the
capacity.
bedrooms,
Yeah,
yeah, so you're going up to that 4 bedrooms. So that is news to me that every ADU has to have I guess, a perk test.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
what I was-
Yeah. The other thing is, in these DEP, in this guidance from DEP, they are allowing towns to allow for 2 systems on a lot. So if you had a 3-bedroom system in the front of your lot, and you're doing a detached ADU in the back, you could put a 1-bedroom system in the way back, and something like that, which I guess isn't normally allowed.
Any other questions, discussion?
All right, so good enough for me, because I missed it. So let's assume you've got a 4-bedroom system. You want it, it's already, you've got 4 bedrooms.
Mhm.
And you put an ADU in, you can put in a separate system for the ADU?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was,
That'll keep Freeman busy.
I guess. Or you have to increase your existing system.
Yeah, good. All right, thank you for that.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion to submit this to the select board for this special town meeting.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, great. Thank you, that passes. All right, next up, we are to talk about the MBTA communities overlay zoning bylaw. I do have a question though. We've got number 5, the working group presentation. Would it make sense to do that first?
If it be the chairwoman's pleasure, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I think so. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Is that for, do we need to vote on an agenda change?
My only question is, where's the overlay map?
It's in the packet, I didn't print it out.
Oh.
Do you want the printout? You can have mine if you want.
I just want to look at it.
We had a little one in the presentation. It's.
Well, maybe it's not in the presentation, we can just see it.
You can have one.
Thank you very much.
All right, very good.
Exciting.
Yes.
Our little run
I'll be happy to.
tomorrow night, our first one, so this practice makes perfect.
Yes. So I'm speaking, chair of the, in addition to being on the planning board, I'm the chair of the MBTA Communities Working Group. And so this is the presentation that we're looking to, tomorrow night will be our first actual one. This is a dry run, shall we say, for the presentation that we're giving to the public. introducing them to the MBTA communities law and what we're doing, as a proposal for, so that we could vote on compliance.
Steve, how would you prefer to do this? Do you want to have us ask questions as we go, or do you want to try to do the whole thing?
That is a great question, Wayne. I was gonna get to that momentarily.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So the way that we're structuring this, just presentation wise, is that I'm actually standing in place of where Brian would be standing, Brian Glennon. He would be giving the intro in the first few slides. And then I think, Megan, you go next, or Tag, you go next?
Me,
You go next,
Tag,
then Tag, then I'll do a few more slides. I'll kind of wrap it up at the end. And then after each of us presents, we're willing to take questions at the end of each of our segments, shall
I
we
think we
say.
have a script for Brian that says something along the lines of, like, the goal is for everyone in the room to have all of their questions answered and to follow along with the dense material. So at the end of each slide that's dense, we'll pause and see if there's any questions, just so we can move the group along with us.
Oh, and I should also say, of course, everyone knows Tag. And then we also have Megan Driscoll, who's a member of the MBTA Communities Working Group, who's helping us with the presentation here. So I should have done that at the outset. Apologies.
She's well known as well.
Yeah, exactly.
For those who might be
I love
online.
the introduction.
Yep. Very good. So, yes, go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna interrupt you. So-
Sure.
So you said it's the first time, though we said not to. You said it's the first time that you'll be giving this presentation, but we've had working sessions, so how is this different? Can you walk us through that?
This is the first time this is the one that we're going to be giving in public. Now, we've had 2 outreach sessions that we did before. Those were before we actually had a final, or a map, or the maps and the locations finalized. And now that we have that, we've now reworked the presentation to reflect that, number one. And then number two, so there were a couple of other things that I wanted to emphasize here too. The presentation that you see right here, this is actually it's based off of a template that we received from the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, the CHAPA. They had provided us with a template that is much nicer than anything I could have put together, in terms of how it appears. But we used that as a template. There was information in it. We took a lot of the information out of it. And we really imposed, if you will, what the working group thought was more appropriate for the town of Duxbury and for the voters. Something that really reflects Duxbury and who we are as a town. So I want to make sure that, people understand, this is not something that, was given to us from another group, and we're just kind of tweaking a little bit. No, we've completely reworked it to reflect what we want to express. And the other thing too is that, as part of this, it would be really helpful to us, if it'd be the board's pleasure, as well as the select board as well. In order for this to be something that the town would consider passing, we really need people to get behind it, as boards, as departments and such throughout town. And so that's part of, the presentation that we're giving you here, hopefully will help to motivate that, and the questions that we ask, or that you ask and that we answer, will get you more comfortable with endorsing it. So with that, we can go to slide 1.
It's also a touch screen, by the way, so
I
just so you know,
Yes.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's that, got it? I just might do that. So this is the agenda. Again, this should take, if this takes longer than 15 minutes, we'll tighten it up. So really 3 segments: understanding the law. We'll discuss very briefly what the MBTA Communities Act is, how the law affects Duxbury, talk briefly about the MBTA Communities Working Group and who we are and what we're doing. Second part, our response to the law, feedback that we got from town meeting, a special town meeting last November. We'll touch on that. Lawsuits that are currently challenging the law, we will touch on those very briefly. And then what we're doing to prepare the town for a compliance vote. Then the third section here, preparing our next steps, our proposed compliance strategy. We've got that outlined here. We'll show that to you. And then opportunities for public outreach, one of which, of course, will be tomorrow evening.
Before we move on to the
Yes.
slide, in the bottom of 2, that last bullet point,
Oh, I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button. Thank you. Go ahead.
that assumes that the town votes for compliance. And this is a presentation intended to persuade people, I think, that compliance is a good idea.
Mhm.
And I'm a little concerned about things that suggest that this is a fait accompli.
I understand that, and that's a valid point. Wayne, it is. And really what we're doing here is we're really presenting the proposition that we're gonna put before voters, for people to vote on, that would put us, if voted upon.
We could
it
change
would
that
be
to
in
our
compliance.
proposition for compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Yes, yep, we can certainly
Thank you.
make that tweak, sure. Great, thank you. Next one. Okay, so, so again, this is what Brian would be talking about here. What is the MBTA community? By the way, all of this is gonna be very fresh to you. I mean, everyone knows this already.
Pretend you've never heard it.
Pretend you've never heard it, please, yes.
Into your mind.
177.
Generally, we blame that on somebody else.
That's what we were responding to.
I know.
So 177 communities, Duxbury is one. In Eastern Mass, we have to update our zoning bylaws. We have to give property owners the right to build multifamily housing by right. In some locations. It was intended as a measure to increase the supply of reasonably priced homes. And, you know, we really want to emphasize this. The law and the guidance, now the regulations, they were written to allow towns to choose the locations in which they'd like the multifamily housing to be legal to build. That's really, really important because we put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into picking the right locations for the town of Duxbury. And then the law was actually signed in 2021. And, you know, here we are 4 years later. Next slide. And then the MBTA Communities Working Group were residents who were appointed by the select board to develop a compliant response to the law. That's what we're presenting to you here tonight. And we hold meetings regularly. Right now, we're on a weekly schedule. They're held regularly, open to the public. We've had people attend our regular meetings. They've had questions, they've had valuable input, and we've responded to that as part of what we have here. And I think that's it for me at this point.
Yeah. Great, thanks. Okay, so how does the MBTA Communities Act impact Duxbury? That's what we're going to talk about. So number one, the impact. Number one, the law requires Duxbury to identify at least 50 acres in town where property owners would have the right to build multifamily housing. Number two, Duxbury is required to pass a zoning plan through town meeting by mid-July to avoid legal consequences. And our special town meeting is scheduled for June 16th, 2025. We want everybody in the room to put it on your calendars and come and vote. Impact number three, by passing a zoning plan, Duxbury is not required to build or pay for any housing. The town only needs to make it legal for property owners to, in the proposed districts, to build multifamily housing if they choose to do so. Does anybody have any questions about the impact on Duxbury? Yeah.
Going to be required to build or pay for anything?
We are not going to be required to build or pay for anything. This is zoning only. It's an overlay district.
Can we talk about sewers?
We can, when we get there, we're gonna talk about sewers. And the only reason I'm gonna hold people off on questions is if we plan to address it later on.
I was gonna ask the same question.
Okay.
All right, now, on number two.
Yeah.
The first sentence, Duxbury is required to pass a zoning plan through town meeting by mid-July to avoid legal consequences. Have you all considered something more along the lines of to come into compliance?
We could change the language from negative to positive. Well, Brian would have an issue with that because Brian has been saying, and we are technically currently compliant. We go out of compliance in July because we filed. So technically we are compliant right now, but we will not be in July.
Maintain compliance?
Because
one of the things that I'm hearing people, so the limited feedback I've received is that people don't want to don't want to be threatened.
Yeah.
by lawsuits. And so by maybe kind of downplaying that or toning it down. But I'm sure that your group has spent a lot of time talking about these types of things. And I'm sure that the words were put there for intent, but that's why I asked.
The issue is, and one of the things that did come up in one of our presentations that we gave, was there were several people who were like, hey, everybody, it's the law. Like, you know, people do want to be lawful, right? And so I think there's a portion of people that need to understand that as of July, we will be unlawfully, you know, and that is the point at which things become at risk, where grant money becomes at risk and where the state could step in, where the resources that we're getting for free could go away. So I do think, I kind of do think it's important for people to know that we will be unlawful in July. And this is our plan to maintain lawfulness, which is different than the last time, right? Because the last time, the SJC hadn't rolled yet. So we were in a little bit of like a freebie, kind of, but we're not in a freebie anymore. Any other questions on this slide? Okay. So we heard the town is the point.
And essentially the feedback from the fall of 2024 town meeting, for which I was there, as a resident and not a member of the MBTA working group. And it was at that meeting that I decided I wanted to get involved, actually. So town meeting rejected a plan that would have zoned Bonji's Turkey Farm, a property that could have accommodated home building in the short term. So point number one. Point number two was residents did not want to zone on any properties where multifamily homes could be built in the immediate future. That became very, very clear. And that residents expressed interest in whether it was possible to avoid complying with the law. This is what we understood coming out of the fall 2024 fall town meeting. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay. And the legalities of the MBTA Communities Act. So in December of 2024, the Supreme Judicial Court, the SJC, ruled in the Milton versus Attorney General case that the MBTA Communities Act is constitutional and the Attorney General has the authority to enforce it. It is the law. So when we voted in 2024, it had not been decided. It was decided after our meeting. So Duxbury is still seeking exemption from compliance in a lawsuit, arguing that the law is an unfunded mandate. But there's issues with this legality with our approach, in that the success of this lawsuit is uncertain based on legal precedent, which also means we don't know when we're going to hear. But also, if the lawsuit is successful, the state can choose to fund the law and it would be enforceable again. And so something to keep in mind is that logically, the state has over 120 communities have taken on this zoning. So it's in their best interest to continue with this under any circumstances, which will likely mean funding it if it becomes an unfunded mandate. But the point is that Duxbury is doing all that it can and a parallel track of trying to become compliant, but fighting it in any way that we can. Does anybody have any questions about that?
I do.
Yes, Wayne?
In the event we pass this law, don't we eviscerate our lawsuit and render it moot?
No, because we have to be compliant by July and we are currently compliant. So I would think no would be the answer.
Amy?
Amy?
My answer is not for that reason, but my answer is that I do not think that the unfunded mandate would be mooted if you passed a bylaw, because you're still,
They
there's
still have
still
to pay.
costs, yeah,
Right.
costs that are incurred.
Okay.
And
Beyond that, I think I'd be getting into litigation strategies, so I probably.
But also they're actually, and they're separate from each other. That's how I think we'd explain it. Like there are towns that are working together to prove that this is an unfunded
So,
mandate.
so here's the concern I have, and this is the concern that people have raised with me.
Yeah,
They say, we're fighting it. We're fighting it hard. And if we go through and pass this thing anyway, we've just cut off our nose to spite our face. And that's a mootness argument, and that's a technical argument that I spent a lot of time thinking about at various points. And I just wondered, where does that argument go? And I think Amy's response is, even if we were past this thing, it's still an unfunded mandate. At that point, however, all they'd have to do is pay us.
Right,
Right, but that was always the point.
correct.
yeah, we would get paid, which would be great because we've expended a lot of money to do this. But I also think the other thing is we are going to talk about that a little bit later, because our approach to that, and we've talked to Brian about this, I'm interested in your thoughts. Our approach to answering that question has to relate with, we as a town could then decide to bring it to a future town meeting and basically eviscerate it ourselves, right?
Oh, well, yeah, that answer was always there for me, in the notion that in the event that we win this thing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be hard to repeal,
Exactly.
right? It would,
But I don't think everybody knows that, because I do think that people think we can't. So I think the message that we have actionable things we can do to take it away is important.
right, but I mean, I just try to make it simple as possible. If it's passed and we win the lawsuit, we can repeal it. The only question I had, and I tell you, I've seen the question raised multiple times now, is don't we render our case moot if we pass this? And I think that's a fair question. And I know Amy's concerned about legal strategy, but there's got to be some short answer, and the short answer is no. Because because this is a question about whether they have to pay us.
Not a question of whether or not it's valid. Yeah.
I wanted to fact check myself, and this is my responsibility if it's incorrect, but we say in December, that's when the SGC, I thought that was in January.
It was.
It was January.
Oh, so we're, okay, we
So I
do need
think
to change
fix
that.
You go with a half piece.
Look at, well.
Kristen, did you have another question?
Is there a moratorium in that event that we pass this town meeting? We are successful in our lawsuit. Is there a moratorium before the town could go back and take up the matter to rescind it?
No, you
Okay.
can rescind it at any time.
Okay.
You would have to call a special town meeting,
Sure.
so there are.
But there's not a waiting,
lead
there's no
time.
moratorium waiting period.
No,
Okay,
But the second we notice the thing, as, then you can't build anyway.
correct.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, you can,
You could build, it would be at your risk, and then
Right.
you would have to tear it down.
yeah,
My question, this might be more for Amy. So say we win the lawsuit, they say, yep, it was unfunded. So in theory, they could just reimburse us for our expenses, right? So at what point would the law be, would our bylaws, would the law say that we don't need to do this anymore?
If they don't fund it, right?
But because why, if they're gonna fund, their
Right.
chances are very high they'll fund it to make sure that the law stays, correct?
So there's a couple things, Madam Chair, they can either fund it, or the legislature can amend 3A to make it fall outside of the unfunded mandate statute. So that is another, I want to say, easy fix, not,
Okay.
but I guess the only way that this law would be held unenforceable is if one of these acts of the legislature repeals it or drastically changes it. There are numerous bills out there right now.
so. You hear unfunded mandate, you hear unfunded mandate. What's the degree to which this mandate has been unfunded? Is it anything more than the cost of a special town meeting?
It is the cost, I mean, in our lawsuit, we go through the costs that, the man hours it's taken to come up with the December, proposal, the estimated cost to come up with this proposal,
So
volunteer hours, staff hours,
we're gonna get compensated for volunteer hours.
special town meeting.
Well, third party engineering.
You would have put it all in there too.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to get some sense of the scale.
There is a concern that was brought up in the February 21st determination by the auditor, where the auditor brought up a section of the regulations that kind of implied that cities and towns may have to provide infrastructure. With Duxbury being such a unique community, meaning that, you don't have public sewer at all. We did mention that also in our complaint.
Yeah, okay, I know we're getting there.
And so out of curiosity, is that number, I imagine is there a dollar amount in the lawsuit? And if so, is that public?
Yeah, the lawsuit, it is, I don't recall it off the top of my head, but, yes, the lawsuit, all of the documents that were filed with the court are public.
Have the various towns suits all been consolidated into one?
So no, that's a really good question. It's very interesting to us. The suits have not been consolidated, but they are all assigned to Judge Gilday, who was the judge, who happened to be there on the day that I filed Middleborough and in Plymouth. So he's now actually been transferred over to Bristol, but he's taking all of the cases. So we
it's gonna
filed.
follow around.
Yeah, so we filed, for example, we filed Weston, which is Middlesex.
Yeah.
We filed in Middlesex, but it got assigned to Judge Gilday, but they're not consolidated. I don't know why.
Yeah.
They're not.
If there's a decision in one of the ones that were previously filed and already argued, doesn't it just answer the question for our case?
It could, except that, by the time on April 2nd, when the motion for preliminary injunction was argued, we had already settled out Middleborough.
Oh, okay.
So, myself and Greg Corbo did not argue, and,
All right.
so.
Are we, gonna be unfortunate situation, just like we were in December, where this case may not be settled by the time we're at a special town meeting.
Yes.
That's why we really have to emphasize that this is a two-track.
Because I can see people who are fighting it to rest on that, the fact that we wanna wait until this lawsuit.
But I think like, so Steve and I had a long conversation about this issue of like just the practicality of it. Like the state is not going to let these 120 towns that have already passed this off, they're just gonna fund it. So it's like, it was kind of like a way to get us the money, which I think is great, but it's not gonna get us out of the compliance. This doesn't make sense for the state to do that. They've been working on this for 7 years. So I think it's like what I hope we aren't gonna do is really focus on the fact that of that argument, that like, why are we doing this again? And just focus on the
I
practicality.
know you're gonna hear that argument.
I know,
Yeah.
and I hope we can get people off of it to understand, like, this was a function of being able to be reimbursed, because it is easily going to be funded, because it is in their best interest to do so.
Thinking about the mechanics of funding the unfunded. If the state were to fund the unfunded mandate, would enforceability apply municipality by municipality as the state would fund it for the municipality? In other words, or would the state have to fund the mandate as a whole across everybody?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not severable across municipalities?
They have to fund it as a whole. The legislature has to fund it.
I see, okay.
Technically, to avoid being an unfunded mandate, you have to fund it in the same legislative session that you enact it, which they did not do. And that's really in my opinion, that's the cornerstone for why the auditor came up with her decision. Is because they determined that there was a cost to implementing 3A. And they did not fund it in the same session in 2021 when they enacted it.
Okay. Helpful, thank you.
One of the things I was gonna say is that, one of my takeaways from the first meeting was that there was the way that we opened the meeting. And it was, we just got this letter last minute from the state.
Yes.
And I would really encourage you to just address it, but just like, this is the deal, this is what's going on, just explain it from the outset. We have a plan for this, but we have a plan, we've got 2 tracks, this is what we're doing, just like you said, but but to Wayne's point, I'd be really articulate about that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because I think as you said, we want to make sure that everybody knows that we, across the board, we're supportive of this approach.
For sure.
Great, yeah, cool.
So the other question that's gonna come up, because I've heard it multiple times, can't we kick this can down the road until we can get rid of Maura Healy?
Well, unfortunately, it was the legislature that passed it, so it's not gonna
But
be.
I've heard that question.
And that's the answer.
Yeah.
The answer is a Baker Polito. It came out of an unrelated housing, study that they did. Congestion study, right? And it resulted in housing, that the issue is housing, and the legislature passed it like almost unanimously. So we're still basically the same legislature, so it's not gonna change. Doesn't matter who the governor's gonna be.
Right.
And they've already started, I mean, there are developments being built, like, this is moving forward. They're creating housing in Massachusetts under this law. They can't go back on it now. We're stuck with it, so we just have to find a way to get around it.
To Kristen's point, I think it's important. Steve, is the plan to do this presentation at the outset? Because I think the December town meeting just started off on a bad foot.
Yes.
And you never even had a chance to get to a presentation. So I do encourage you to have this presentation done before it's even opened up to comments or questions in the crowd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting this tomorrow night at the forum.
Right.
And we are hoping we'll tweak it further. I mean, we've got 3 of them to go through this. And then, yeah, we absolutely. This needs to be like, the thing that got me interested in being on MBTA was I was so disappointed going to the town meeting and not hearing the presentation. I left and everybody felt like they won something, and yet I knew everyone had lost. Like, nobody there learned a single thing, because I went there learning about it. I didn't know anything about it, and I left being like, I feel like that was just hijacked, and I thought it was terrible. I was really upset. So it was what the impetus for me to want to join, because I felt like, oh my gosh, they had worked so hard on that plan, and they didn't even get the opportunity to tell people about it. So we're starting off even worse now because nobody even knew about it. We lost that opportunity to get all 700 people to learn a little bit that night. And we're really starting over even worse than we were before, which I think is unfortunate. We have a big hill to climb.
To your point, Matt, we're being very interactive here as we plan to be for our public outreach sessions. When we're presenting at special town meeting and at the planning board hearing, the idea is that we would go through in its entirety in that.
Yeah, that's good.
Tag, you're up.
Did you want to do the handoff?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, I did.
introduce all of us, then we're just gonna run up, because I don't.
Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? I'm here.
It'll be on the last slide.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Now we're gonna take a look at I think this is also supposed to be yours, but,
I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do it?
we never actually did the
It probably makes
assignments.
sense for me too, because it is the part of the law part, but
Mhm.
you know.
I'm happy to
you're
speak
gonna
to
be
it.
mad.
I tagged for 7 through 9.
I did too.
Yeah.
7 through 9. So we have, a lot of discussion around, what happens if we comply, what happens if we don't comply. We wanted to frame this positively, so these are the benefits of going forward and voting yes in the affirmative for the proposition. There are at least 17 grant funding programs that provide money for capital improvements to the town, for projects that we know that we would be interested in funding, like protection from storm damage, upgrading infrastructure like sidewalks. And over the past couple of years, we have historically received at least $2 million in grant funding, which if we are no longer in compliance with MBTA communities, we would no longer be eligible for. And at this point, I know we always get the question, well, how much money would we lose? It's not a matter of losing money. It's a matter of losing the ability to gain access to money. At this point, today, we are aware of between $1 and $2 million in grants, which are either already the request has been sent, or we're preparing a request for that money. And this is an ongoing activity of the town. So at least $2 million and more to come in the future that we would be requesting as long as we're in compliance. Finally,
They're actually pulling money from Marshfield. What money would we lose?
Marshall just lost $250,000.
yeah, I'm aware of a 500,000 grant for the sidewalk, which we've been told wouldn't be lost, but because it's a moving target, we don't know that for
And what's
sure.
interesting about the sidewalk committee, I spoke to Elaine. Yeah, Elaine the other day. So the $500,000 that they've applied for and haven't received will cover the work that's being done this summer on the first part, but there's 2 more parts. And those 2 more parts, they are planning to apply for grants that would be up between like $500,000 and $1 million. So she was very surprised to learn that this is at risk. So we might only get a third of our project done. And that's a very easy thing for them to pull. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very well within the 17 grants.
I actually wonder if it would make sense, I don't know if this is the right place for it to add after upgrading infrastructure, how am I including sidewalks in Washington Street? Because that's come to town meeting for that vote and people are aware of it. And
Yeah, we've discussed this and it's already got too many words on the slide, basically.
yeah,
It's in the top.
Add that, no, that's not too much, including sidewalk project, because I think you're right, people like. It took a long time to get that approved and people are like really, we're going to the sidewalk town meeting, like they're doing an open house, so we're gonna have some information there so people know that it'll be at risk.
right, and that's a tangible one, you know, I think people get it, to me, I get that, it's some of the other things are a little bit more.
Abstract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and the other benefit, of course, is that if we see it clear to pass the amendment, we maintain control over our zoning. And this is one of the things that I like to highlight is the distinction between the 40B statute passed in 1969, which is out of our control, and MBTA communities, although it is a state mandate, it is local zoning bylaw. We have chosen the locations. We have written the requirements for the design of the site, so it stays within town if we pass the amendment. If we don't pass the amendment, there is a possibility that the state could choose locations for us and even provide bylaw language for us, which is not something we'd like to see happen. Okay, any questions on this?
You know, I think that you have to walk a fine line between not feeling threatened, but enforcing that final point. I mean, I think it's drastic. That is the drastic. I think that the taking away of the grants is the more punitive measure, but under the law, yeah, I mean, the AG could come in and put an overlay in at their discretion and not ours.
We felt.
But you do walk that fine line of people, hey, don't threaten me. I'm not gonna vote just because I'm threatened, but
We
they
also
do have to know the.
Yeah.
You know, they have to know the ramification, potential ramifications.
We have 2 of these slides. This is the positive.
Yeah, I
Yes,
was gonna
yes.
commend you on, this is very, will retain all eligibility.
We changed all the language. We-
Yes.
in the- So we're trying to mention it all the choices, but we don't want it to sound like.
Yeah, and we know it's upsetting. It's upsetting to be threatened. I mean, I've been working on this for 3 years, literally, when I first found out in late 2021, that it was gonna impact Duxbury. I've been asking what are we gonna do about this? How are we gonna push back on this? The way we push back is by maintaining control, by passing the amendment. Keep it in-house.
And our amazing choices that are coming up next.
Darn right.
Next slide, please.
That's how.
So the proposal is 2 parts, the zoning map, which you see before you today, and the bylaw language, 16 pages, which we'll be discussing in a minute. What you see here are the district. It is a single district with 2 sub-districts. This is the way it's technically described. Between the 2 of them, they add up to just over 50 acres, 50.1 acres. We have zoned the 2 sub-district as the existing village at Duxbury and Kingstown Way and the Island Creek Apartments on Tremont Street by the highway exit, which was part of last year's proposal. And what we want to make sure that you take away from looking at this map, it looks just like last time, right? Why is this any different? It's different because this parcel here over on Kingstown Way, previously we were proposing the Bonji's parcel, which is nearby. And it had no existing development, a little existing development. This parcel is the village at Duxbury. It is already developed at a very high density. In fact, the density of that parcel is such that it is not possible to put any more residential capacity in there. So there is zero prospect for building coming out of this proposal.
Even if this thing passed.
At Kingston.
Even if it passes.
Even if it passes, it's not gonna be any more dense.
It's actually equal almost to, I think it's like maybe +1.
Almost to the
They
unit.
give it
Yeah.
1 extra unit.
No, it's the other way.
They
One
have to
less,
knock it down, 1 less.
one less.
Yeah.
And I think that's a point you want to focus on, because I've talked to other residents in town and they've asked me about this new, and I said, listen, my understanding is that it's currently at a higher density as we stand here today than it would be under the new overlay.
That's right.
And each resident said, well, that's very important to know.
Yes.
So I do think, it's important to make that point.
Right, if you were to choose to
No, sorry,
blow,
Steve, didn't mean to steal your thunder.
if you were to choose to blow up probably the most lucrative business in Duxbury.
Right, so I think it's
Complicated.
tremendous.
200 individual owners, and
Right.
it's just not, it's
It's
not a
just
feasible thing to do.
And so finally, the other sub-district is the Island Creek Apartments and a little bit of additional land, which we'll talk about. And we expect that based on the area that's zoned here, this will also not result in any new development, certainly in no time in the near term and probably not even over the long term. So now we'll go, if we could, to the next slide and look at the individual sub-districts. So we'll start here on the right, closer to me. This is the village at Duxbury, Kingstown Way here, Summer Street, excuse me. It joins up here. And you see it, the frontage is all treed, there's a building here included in a parking lot, some green space, and this is the actual village's building. The overall density as it's developed on this parcel is about 12 units per acre, and the zoning bylaw confers rights on this property owner to develop at 12 units per acre. So a project that was constructed under 40B could be reproduced now under Duxbury's local zoning should the ordinance pass. But as we pointed out, you would have to redevelop, destroy an entire structure and redevelop it and end up with the same thing. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, in terms of the Tremont Street location, the Island Creek Apartments, and here it's 3A, Tremont Street at the bottom. This is parcel of 29.47 acres, and that satisfies the requirement of the law that at least one of the sub-districts be at least 25 acres. So this is our compliance plan. The density for this area in the proposed bylaw is 19 units per acre, which you'll note is higher than the 15 that's required, but that's because we're averaging across the 2 sites. You average up 30 acres at 19 and 20 acres at 12, and it comes out to just about 16, actually, is the way it works out. So that satisfies the requirement of law. So again, we're looking at what's the prospect for any kind of development on this site? Well, as you can see, This is all developed buildings, parking lots, buildings, whoops.
Touchscreen.
Touchscreen, yep.
There we go. Thank you. Large building at the back. There is a parcel here with some buildings on it. Obviously, there's parking and parking here associated with this property, which is not within the district. And as you can see by the parcel lines here, what we have within this yellow boundary of the sub-district are two property owners. This is owned by Beacon West, the operator of the apartment buildings, and this parcel is owned by the Baptist Church. So the question is, well, isn't this greenfield? Couldn't you develop housing in this collection of maybe 5 acres or 4 acres of land? And the answer is that it's controlled by the church and they're using it for parking that's required under the bylaws. They would have to retain that parking. They would have to figure out how to put septic capacity in for that development. The church is currently on the septic system for this complex. And so it would be a matter of whether there was capacity or they could expand a septic. And because of the separate ownership and the required use of parking, it makes it extremely challenging for this parcel to be developed in any way.
And Tag, I think, also just as it relates to capacity sewer or not sewer, what Brian said is that the septic was at capacity for
Yeah,
them now.
I heard that. I don't like to
I like to
repeat
use that
hearsay because I don't have that.
So
data.
there's no, they have to do something very serious with their wastewater management. So it's just expensive.
Mhm. So we're very confident based on these two sub-districts, and I want to again point out that you see the white lines here are parcel boundaries, and this sub-district captures a part of this parcel. So we're splitting that parcel, some of it out of the zone, some of it in the zone. On this parcel over at the village, this is actually contiguous. This line here bisects this parcel. So there is greenfield over here that is owned by the village, but it's not part of the district. So if somebody says, oh, you know, the village has 30 acres and they can develop. No, they do have that extra land, but it is not part of this district. Now, any questions about the?
Question about the owners. Have you all had a chance to talk to, let's see, we'll start with Village of Duxbury.
Yep, Brian met with them and we had a meeting scheduled for Thursday with the church, but I can't do it. So we're gonna meet the following week with the Reverend and a few people there. Just to understand, they were happy we reached out, just to understand, like, it would be good, it would have been good to know, or at least be good for the next forum to know. We understand from them, they don't plan to sell any of this land. There's no intention of that. We just want to hear it directly from them. And also they have to maintain their parking anyway. So some of this can't even be done, but that little tiny couple in the back, it would be good to just know how they feel about it.
And then how about Island Creek?
Yeah, Brian met with them.
And they're comfortable with this?
Yeah, and I think they knew from the last go around.
Yep.
It doesn't really affect them.
No real change for them since the last
Yeah, right.
proposal.
What's the current density of Island Creek?
Well, it depends on exactly where you bound, how you measure it. It's somewhere between 12 and 14.
It's 353,
320 units.
320 units.
Have they had a height restriction already at Island Creek? Would they need to come in and get a height variance if they intended to actually?
Well, the existing buildings are
Overlay?
at the 46.5 feet, which is in the proposal, so there's no change there. They only have one building at that height. In theory, yeah, they could maybe knock down a building and build a taller one. That's possible.
Yeah, they have, most of them, if you driven back there, they're mostly 3, but there's one that's 4.
I think it's the farthest one
Yeah.
back there.
Mhm.
So could they add a floor, I guess? But that, again, like. who would
Yeah,
care?
and so this is part of the point that I'd like to make, and when you think about it, I know, we all are very concerned about the impact of development on the town. This is already densely developed. If they were to build large apartment buildings there, you wouldn't notice the difference. And if they were to find a way to develop this forested area in the back, there is no street frontage on Tremont Street. There is a business, a nonprofit religious organization. There are no butters, there are no single-family homes, there is no neighborhood that would be impacted by development at this location. So I really don't see any objection to granting this additional development right to this property owner.
There's no downside.
Any other questions? Okay. And I think then.
Yep.
See, back to you.
Thank you. So, Ted was just showing you the maps, so then the question, obvious question is, why are we proposing to zone properties where the multifamily housing already exists? Well, as Tag had mentioned, it really creates very few legal opportunities for property owners to add new units. At the Village of Duxbury property, there's really no opportunity at all there. And the opportunity is minimized at the Allen Creek property, at the Allen Creek sub-district. And then adding additional units to properties that have existing dense development on them. It's logistically difficult and it's prohibitively expensive to do that, as opposed to working on greenfield areas where there's no existing development. The Village of Duxbury, so that's the MCOD Kingstown district. We mentioned and we'll emphasize that we're proposing that the overlay has the same density as what exists there currently. So again, there would be no opportunity to add additional units there. The condo and cooperative associations that you have at a place like the MCOD Kingstown, they would need a majority vote to make any changes at all, at least along the lines of what we're talking about here, and that's highly unlikely to pass. And then with regard to the MCOD at Tremont, that's the Allen Creek District, the wastewater treatment facility there is already pretty much at capacity and it would need expansion if they were going to be adding units at the Allen Creek District.
Steve, can I just add that I think we should add, or we need to make sure you can say it, because it's going to come up, we might as well deal with it. Is this, why would the state agree to that?
Oh, sure.
Because
Yep.
we didn't actually, I'm recognizing as we're doing.
No,
that,
we
didn't
haven't,
actually
yeah.
cover that.
We-
So the state will agree because the state has already agreed. There are 2 other towns that have taken this approach where they have zoned multifamily dense areas already.
Yes.
And so we know that it's been approved before. Again, it goes back to that the state is allowing us to decide how it really, if we want the building or we don't, and we're choosing not to.
What are those 2 towns?
One of them is Hingham.
Hingham is the
And the
one
other
that I
one
know.
is-
Yeah. I don't know. I can't think of what the other one is. Hingham is a great example.
Did we get Champa, the others, paper
that
compliance
urban
town.
Yeah, that I
So
don't know.
Hingham is doing paper compliance. They basically did.
So
the-
Braintree, I
already
know.
did.
Oh, Braintree, thank you.
Braintree.
Yes, yes.
I've done a bunch of Braintree work.
Braintree and Hingham.
So Braintree, they designated basically all the parking lots in front of the stores along the highway, the
Mhm.
Grossman's Plaza.
Yep.
And they designated a fully built up condo unit. And then there's one other area that designated but really restricted what you could build.
Mhm. And they are compliant
And
with those districts.
Yes.
Mhm. So, yes, any other questions on this slide or? No? Okay, next one. So what's our strategy here for complying? So the strategy, the proposal that we're giving to you here, or that we're proposing for you, we're creating a zoning plan that complies with the MBTA Communities Act in case our lawsuit fails. So that's the first part. The second part is we're zoning properties where the development of new housing is really going to be difficult or even impossible possibly to develop additional units at either of these sub-districts that we're proposing. Our strategy also, we also want to maintain eligibility for state money for the state grants and to avoid any enforcement action without creating any new housing. And then in the event that the law does become invalid as a result of our lawsuit, the town could respond in the future by amending the bylaw at a future town meeting to remove the MBTA Communities Overlay District to basically to
Why don't you
remove
just
this.
say the town can respond by repealing the bylaw?
We can repeal the bylaw. Yep. Yep. So that is a possibility that's open to us.
I like repealing better.
Yep.
I'll change
Yep,
that.
we can do that. And I would expect that town representatives would be very responsive to a situation like that. So what's next? So we have, these are the information sessions that we have. One, of course, is tomorrow evening, May 28th, 6 to 8. These are all 3 of those are in the Mary Room at the library. And then the last one will be during the day, from 1 to 3 p.m. On June 4th, again, all in the Mary Room. And these will be presentations, basically the same one that you've seen here. We have the planning board public hearing on May 12th at 6:15. And that will be in the senior center here. So we'll be again presenting this presentation at that time. And then, of course, what it all boils down to is the June 16th special town meeting on June 16th at 7 p.m. So please come, please come to town meeting on June 16th and vote on the proposal. And next slide. And learn more, you can check up on the QR code here. It will take you to the resources that we've developed this proposal, as well as other materials that we've prepared as part of the working group in preparation for this particular proposal.
And we are going to deliver this at other boards, and when we do,
Yes.
the last slide will actually say, will you endorse
Yes,
this proposal? We're
we have
hoping
that up.
that the effort to go around town, run
Where was
around
it?
like chickens with our heads cut off, will result in lots of boards basically voting to approve, voting to support, to support it, exactly.
Endorse it. Yep.
Yeah.
What, I was told we were gonna talk about the sewer.
Oh, yeah, well, we had wastewater. We did, well, wastewater.
We touched on it,
We
yeah.
touched on it.
So the question that was posed to me directly is, well, what about this? What about the fact that's out there that suggests that the municipality has to pay for upgrades?
We didn't address that.
We don't address that specifically, nope. But I think the key thing is here, particularly, so to your point, Wayne, about sewer and waste treatment. The town of Duxbury, we're a private sewer. We don't have any public sewer here in town, as a practical matter. The Island Creek, they have their own private waste treatment system there that's basically at capacity right now. If they wanted to add units there, it would be at their cost to modify their waste treatment system to handle any additional waste that would come from additional
For
units.
purposes of the unit capacity analysis, it is assumed that the housing developers will design projects that work within existing water and wastewater constraints.
Mhm.
And the developers, the municipality or the Commonwealth will provide funding for infrastructure updates.
Developer municipality, quick one.
So we're on the hook.
Hmm. Possibly along with the state.
Well, I mean, also, that's part of the reason why we've chosen sites that will be very unlikely to build. I think that.
Maybe what's helped with this?
So if you look at the, you're reading from subsection 2, if you look at subsection 1 above it, it does say MBTA communities are encouraged to consider the availability of water and wastewater infrastructure when selecting the location of a new multifamily zoning district. And so, again, going back to my previous comment where, Duxbury is unusual because you don't have that opportunity. You can't say, okay, this part of town is sewered, so we're gonna have to put it there. That I think the fallback is to put it where there's already developed area. With regard to subsection 2, that the clause that you read, Wayne, it's concerning.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a way around that.
Yeah.
I don't think we do. That's a simple reality. But again, that gets to what Megan just said. We wanted to minimize the possibility that there would be any development in the near term and minimize it in the long term by overlaying the existing dense areas. And, this really, in terms of minimizing the possibility of future development, it really doesn't get a lot better than this. I mean, this is truly the best we can do if we're looking to minimize future development. So if we're doing that, then Wayne, what we're doing is we're minimizing the possibility that the town could be on the hook for expenses like that to expand waste treatment infrastructure at any of these sites. I think that's the best we could possibly do here.
Thank you all for your work. Really appreciate the fact that it's huge change it's a huge change in the approach last time. So that means you've done this twice. So thank you. Not only that, you put a lot of thought into it. Thank you.
That's Peg, that's Megan, that's the other members of the group. They have done just tremendous work on this. So I'm deeply grateful for all of them. Yes.
It's
And,
hard
and
to,
Amy and you folks too. I mean, we've gotten a lot of great feedback from you. So thank you.
we really want the town to be happy with the plan, you know, we know they don't want building, but none of us want building.
No, thank
You know, we don't want building, so how do we achieve that?
Not on someone else's terms anyway.
Exactly, on our own terms, yeah.
Hold on a second. Conversation for another day.
I mean, it'd be great if we could have some affordable housing.
Yes.
I would love that.
Yeah, that's one thing that we don't address, which I, think will come through in questions and conversation. Many folks that I've spoken with are interested in having this housing protection. We have a need, we should acknowledge that.
We do. If you want to, you're welcome to do that. My approach has kind of been that we're gonna do this on our time, our schedule. We'll have that conversation on our time, our schedule, when it's right, but not now. This is
Not in this way.
Yeah, not this way.
Well, this isn't even producing affordable housing, so it's not even about affordable.
Well, but if you've got 10% affordable,
Send up to 20 if we get a feasibility analysis.
And that's expensive.
Yes.
that was
I had a request from the board to weigh in.
Oh, sure. Who's,
If there was somebody looking to ask a question.
I'm pretty sure it's Christine.
That was Christina.
Right, yeah, I was just wondering, sorry, I'm in the basement. I've been looking at the connections between all the people working on this. Beacon Communities is on the board of CHAPA, the organization that is advising us on the communication. And they've also filed an amicus brief against the Marshfield and all the other towns who are seeking an exemption. CHAPA also, not CHAPA, Beacon Communities also owns Island Creek. It just seems a little weird that CHAPA it's already, everybody knows it's a front for developers, but it is a little bit weird to have these relationships. And I was just wondering if anybody would like to comment on them.
Christine and Steve Dan. I do not have a lot of dealings with CHAPA myself, either personally or professionally. CHAPA, they're a nonprofit organization. They provide support to municipalities throughout the Commonwealth. As I mentioned at the outset, they provided us with a template for communication that we've modified pretty significantly to reflect only what we want to be communicating here in the town of Duxbury to the residents of Duxbury. They have not provided us with recommendations on where we should be citing these things. They haven't provided us with any guidance with respect to what densities we should be assigning to these things. They really have just provided us with a template and some suggestions for communication that we've taken and made our own. And we are communicating them as you've seen us do tonight. So that's really the extent to which CHAPA has been involved in this.
You're also basically suing us.
I'm sorry?
They're also basically working against us in the court.
I don't understand what you mean.
They filed an amicus brief against Marshfield and all the other towns. We're not named on it yet because we haven't been thoroughly joined. But they worked with the Lawyers for Civil Rights and a law firm in Boston to file an amicus brief opposing the attempts to get an exemption from the law, from the MBTA communities. They filed it in the Plymouth Superior Court, I think on April 4th. Or maybe April 2nd.
Okay, I guess I'm not clear on how that affects us.
Well, it seemed a little bit strange that you're working with a group that is working against us legally. And it seems that from listening to your meeting last time, your communications were heavily influenced by this group, with them providing an original template in a highly manipulative, I've worked in communications before, a highly manipulative communications plan to basically convince us to do something and make it sound like there's no other alternatives. And then they're also working against us legally. Does nobody else think that's a problem?
I would remind you, when we were doing our outreach, back in February, I think it was February or March, whatever it was, it was a while back, when we were doing our first round of outreach. We had not identified, or we had identified, but we had not finalized in any way, the sites that we are now proposing. We had a number of options that a different consultant, the MAPC, that they had modeled for us, that we would have been able to use for compliance proposition purposes. So they didn't, no one has presented this as a fait accompli of any kind. They presented us with options, we modeled them, we presented them, we got feedback from residents on which ones they preferred. And we have incorporated that into the presentation that we've shown you here tonight, and that we'll be presenting to residents later on this week.
Okay, so don't you think those three choices were a little bit of a false choice? I mean, some people chose the other sites, but Island Creek is all developed more than the other two sites that you proposed. Like one of them involved building on town land.
Sure, I'm sorry, I guess a few different things there. As we mentioned during the presentation, the two sub-districts that we're proposing, they're already pretty much fully built out. There's existing dense development. There's nowhere else in town, in the town of Duxbury, where there's development at a higher density to either of these two locations. So and the message that we heard loud and clear from special town meeting last November is that residents were not interested in having further development under this particular law. And so in response to that, that's why we are proposing the sites that we have, really to minimize the possibility that that would be happening either here in the short term or in the long term. So that's why yeah, go ahead.
I have a couple questions. First of all, is that a scripted answer that Megan and Chapa wrote for you?
No, it's an honest
Well,
answer.
that's what you were talking about at the last meeting. And then secondly, I've gone through the developers who are on the Chapa board and what kind of properties they develop. And like Alicia Babcock said at your last meeting, the property goes up in value when you rezone it like this. And there's all these projects that the developers who fund Chapa do that are basically redevelopments of places like Island Creek.
Well, I mean, when you rezone a location, I mean, whether it's something increases in value or doesn't increase in value is fully unique to the locations that are being overlaid. So we have no information on that. That's well beyond the scope of anything that we're looking at here. Again, the purpose behind why we chose these sites is because there's existing density there, and it minimizes the possibility that there would be additional dense development that would go on again in the near term or in the long term. That's just a fact, and that's why we chose these locations.
Okay, we have going forward. We have a public hearing on multiple hearings.
We do, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not the public hearing?
No,
This is the planning board meeting.
Yes.
Okay, when are you having the public hearing?
If you were paying attention, it was on the last slide. We had, so it's May 12th at 6:15, and that'll be here we're in the senior center right now. It'll be here in the senior center.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Christine.
Get back to the presentation.
It's always a pleasure to see Judy Barrett.
Hello, Judy.
Just curious. That's the only reason I signed on. I happen to be home tonight.
No town is requiring you to be there tonight.
Wow.
Right, any questions about the presentation? No.
Nope.
No. Well done.
Very helpful feedback. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll make the changes for that, just so that we have a new.
All right, so we finished with the presentation, so now we can go back to the agenda whereby we are to actually vote to submit the MBTA Communities Overlay Zoning Bylaw Article to the Select Board. So let's talk about that. Has anybody had a chance to read it? I only got about halfway through today.
I think Stephen read it.
Yeah. Well, you're excited with your eyes closed.
My principal question was, similar to the previously, is do these buffer zones and setbacks ultimately, are they ultimately going to be perceived as such that EOHLC will reject this plan?
So, so that's my main overall question, my overall concern. And I know that Mr. Lampert had the same concern, and I know that you met with him on Thursday night. I unfortunately was on vacation and not able to be at that meeting, so I don't know if that concern was resolved or not. I did mean to connect with him today, but the day got away from me, and I know that he has an appointment tonight. So I guess I had two main concerns. One of them was, can you do the 19 units per acre and the 12 units per acre? And from what I heard from your presentation, that you've confirmed you can do that. Correct. So that was one of my concerns. And then my other concern is the overall concern, which is there are a lot of buffers, a lot of setback requirements, things like that. And I don't know if that means that this has to go back to MAPC for them to remodel it. Or do you plan on submitting this to EOHLC for pre-approval? Just not sure.
Well, the bylaw text that we have before us today is heavily revised in terms of the reorganization and elimination of some duplication. It does not contain any additional setbacks, any new reservation of land from the modeling exercise that MAPC already did, where they said that it is in compliance.
Okay.
So I understand the concern. When you read it, yes, there are a lot of places where we talk about buffers and setbacks. But when it's based on the numbers in the dimensional table, and those haven't changed. If anything, they've actually been relaxed. Before, I think we had 100 feet everywhere, and we skinned that down to 50 feet, only 100 if there's an abutter, and there are no abutters. So, you know, if you actually look at it, there are probably less reservations of land through setbacks than there were in the prior iteration.
But these buffers and setbacks are good things if this ultimately is approvable through MAPC and through HLC, and they're really nice aspects of this.
Yeah, and it's my understanding, as again, you just said, that they really don't increase that risk. If anything, they reduce that risk in this iteration of the bylaw.
Do these type of buffers exist on these two properties?
Yeah. The answer would be yes. Yeah, mostly vegetarian. Not in that, because it's specifically now in the language, only where it abuts existing developed neighborhoods. So that doesn't even apply for most of Island Creek because it abuts wildlands. Right? And it doesn't apply to most of the village of Duxbury because it abuts, again, Greenfield. Yeah, so I'm personally very comfortable that it doesn't need to be run back through the MAPC model. We've had the conversation with John, and he's told us, well, for one thing, it doesn't have the ability to even incorporate all those detailed setbacks and buffers and things like that. You can't plug them in. And his professional opinion was that all that stuff isn't really gonna matter anyway. You're nibbling at the edges of the lot. The thing that's really constraining the development is the 35% lot coverage. That is the constraint that is going to limit the ability to place housing and parking in parcels.
Maybe if this passes and the existing setbacks are not satisfied with the existing buildings at Island Creek in the villages, wouldn't those be pre-existing non-conformity? At that time?
So that's a really good question, but I think aren't both of them 40Bs?
They're 40B.
They were both created
they're
under
both 40Bs.
40Bs, so they would not be considered pre-existing non-conforming. As soon as the affordability limits are pulled,
Yeah.
those are non-compliant. However, they've been there for more than 10 years.
Not to get too far in the legalese, but yeah.
Does building Duxbury have, did that originally have some affordable housing units?
If it was 40B, it must have.
Yeah, the Iron Creek has some, but not the village.
So then it must not have been 40B.
Yeah.
The original project was, as I recall, 106 units, mainly senior age restricted, and they were all affordable.
They were.
Yes, there were no market rate units in the original Island Creek development.
Right, I agree.
I mean, that goes way back to the late 70s, but that's what it was.
But doesn't that have to be maintained?
Yes, but it's been expanded because now there's 320 units.
320 units,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's 320 units there now.
120 units are affordable?
I think it's a rental, isn't it?
It's all rentals.
So,
Island Creek,
so
yeah.
the town gets credit for all of the
All of
units
us, okay.
on the SHI.
But what about the village?
Yeah, that one.
Judy, do you know anything about the village?
I do. There are no affordable units at the village. That was a special permit, somewhat contrived under whatever provisions of the zoning bylaw it could fit into at the time. I mean, there's a whole history with that project and how it ended up where it is, but there are no affordable units there.
So what happens if we pass it and an EHOLC says, oops, we really don't like these setbacks or these? What happens then?
So in that instance, you have the zoning, your zoning is on your books. It's zoning, it's as of right multifamily housing, but you are not considered compliant and you will not get grants.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, well, one presumes that because we're working hard to try and get this to EOHLC,
Yeah.
that we will have feedback hopefully before the day of town meeting.
or before 5:15
Yeah.
for a 7 o'clock meeting.
Yeah. So should we receive that feedback prior to town meeting?
Right.
Would it then be reasonable to amend this
Oh, definitely.
prior to the vote?
Yep,
Okay.
definitely.
By striking something.
Yeah, and we've done that in the past
Okay.
with other towns.
Sorry. And so
Yeah.
if we submit this soon, it's April, May. I mean, is it likely that they would get back to us? How many days do they have?
Well,
So they have 90 or 120, but they have, both EOHLC and the Attorney General's office have expressed, that they would be more than willing to work with cities and towns that are not in compliance. So I would assume that they would get it back to us. And, I think that the timing of last year's, review is fully recognized by EOHS.
They were able to turn a review around for us last time, at 2 weeks' notice.
Oh, right.
With far more communities going in for compliance at that time than are going in now. So,
Okay, got it.
yes, so their workload is considerably lighter right now than it was then, so. Does that mean we would get it in 2 weeks or less? I wouldn't presume that, no.
Right.
So in terms of, we addressed the two items you mentioned, the density projection.
Yes, I'm actually very pleased to hear that you do plan on sending this to EOHLC for pre-approval. So, that does alleviate any of my concern, see what they come back with.
Is that a density averaging question? Is that what the issue is?
So, no, if I may, Madam Chair, so, Judy, both Jim Lambert and myself brought up the fact that, because of there's setbacks and buffer zones and buffer strips that are required under this. Our concern was that, yes, it's reducing the buildable area of each lot. And they already have a 35% lot coverage. So I think from what I understand from tonight, I think if you take that 35%, you can put in all those you can have the buffer strips, you can have the setbacks, because you're only allowing 35% coverage, which has been modeled.
Right.
So my concern is that the buffer strips and the setbacks do not get modeled.
Right, they don't.
Right, so that was my major concern, but now hearing that the 35% has been modeled and that is rather low.
Mm.
I feel better. And then also sending it out to EOHLC.
Yeah.
So that was my main concern. And I can relay that to Jim Lambert that,
Great.
that, that I'm okay with that. Cause we did have a meeting, Judy, myself and Jim Lambert and Tag and Steve and
Mhm.
Brady and Rebecca. So we did go over this already once, but then there was a subsequent meeting that I couldn't make.
All right, so in terms of just, I guess I'd like to try and do the 30,000 foot overview of this for the planning board, very familiarity. This has been through a couple of rapid iterations in the last 2 weeks. And what we have now, I'd like to refer to it as a belt and suspenders approach. Because we had an earlier draft, which was shorter and contained pretty concise and succinct language for things like parking and stormwater, just about a page, 4 or 5 paragraphs. And the concern was that there were a lot of requirements in our planned unit development section 700 that we really wanted to bring in, but we weren't sure how to go about that. And so we referenced section 700, said all that stuff applies to. And then Amy gave the feedback, we discussed it, and said, that's really too much to ask of the reader, you have to bring in the language. So Steve and I went through that exercise, we brought in 700, and what did that do? It duplicated. And we had some concise language, and then we had all the details. And they were in 2 different places. So what you see here is, we still have that original concise compliance language that will satisfy the understandability requirement. And we have added and supplemented that below with the additional requirements from 700, which don't conflict with the density requirements. So I think it's a really good and strong statement that yes, we want to have this multifamily zoning in place. And these are our rules. And so I'll point out to you that, and this is where I go into the details a little bit. We have tried to divide this out so that it's more aligned with our existing bylaw in terms of the numbering. Section 440, most of our bylaws just have a simple single digit under that, 440.1, 440.2. In other bylaws, we've had to actually go to 441, 442, 443. We've not done that here. But I did, because there are a lot of design requirements for site plan review, you'll see that after 440.8 on page 6, where we mentioned site plan requirements, and then it jumps down to 440.801. So the intention is that 801, 802, and then the following 803, a couple of pages later, all fall under 440.8. So I wanted to mention that and make sure that that's clear, because it's a little bit of non-conventional approach.
So would it just be dropped into the bylaw? It would be dropped in sections, or would it be dropped in?
This is one section, 440. Full stop. But in order to break out all the numerous requirements under site plan requirements, we have 801 for buildings, 802 for site layout, which brings in a lot of this open space language that we want to keep. And then finally, after you roll through all of that, on page 11, you'll see 440.803. And 803 are termed as community requirements, and this is really kind of the meat from 700. So you'll see under 803, we say we bring in the definitions from 725 and another discussion point about the time required to do that. And so you'll see that the last couple of pages here in 803 are really gory details that we picked right out of 700. And I know we can even talk about this for a moment, the thing with the tables and the radii and its road layout criteria. I know that there are 2 different views on this. Some people look at this stuff and they say, what madman created these rules? Who could possibly follow them? Right? And then there are other people saying, no, these are specifications that guarantee our safety and the consistency of our streets, and we must always keep them. I don't know where the truth lies. We're erring on the side of trying to sustain the requirements that we've had here.
Amy, are you good with this?
Yes, so the clean version is so much easier to look at, other than the comments.
Yes.
The comment, it's also daunting, because I think it's like up to some 20-some pages with all the comments. And it's not, it's only 15 pages. So, I know. 440, severability is also 440.8 tags, so we'll have to change that. So I am, and the reason why both Mr. Lambert and myself were asking that sections from 700 be put in actual wording is because if, for example, section 700 got amended because of a different reason, then it wouldn't make any sense. And so I do not, I don't like when I see, when I see bylaw amendments referring to other bylaw sections. I would prefer to see the language. So I do appreciate that. That was a comment that we had 2 weeks ago when we all met. No, I think this is good. I think if perhaps we could get if you could send me the clean version, and then I can get that over to Mr. Lambert and let him know that my concerns were addressed, and I think my concerns were the same as his. So, yeah.
And so finally, as a part of the point of departure and note of caution, we still have an instance here where this bylaw references another section in its entirety, and that refers to section 800, which is the special permit requirements for section 700 now, because this is by right. There is no special permit. We're very clear about that here, but we're trying to invoke those procedures from 800 rather than having to edit and duplicate and replicate that. And we discussed this at the last working group meeting, what that means is we're setting a trap for ourselves. Should an application ever come in on this, we're gonna have to figure that out. We go through 800 and separate out and discard anything that's special permit and figure out what stays in site plan review. My bent would be to do that next and make sure we have a handle on that before this really goes forward. But within the time frame of getting this bylaw done, this is really the best.
So are you wanting to do that before this goes to town meeting?
No, I would want to do that before we received an application under this, which I don't expect to happen.
Okay, just like you want to put it on our backlog, you just want to add it, okay, just.
So for example, it says that under site plan review, under 440.4, it says procedures and regulations for development. And then it references section 800, but then it says right there shall be no special permit requirement, which is what EOHLC is going to need to see.
I think we have a question on page 3 of the clean version under local preference policy. Is that typical? It's about having at least one member of the household is resident of the town of Duxbury, or at least one member of the household is a relative of a Duxbury resident.
Yeah, I don't have information about how typical it is, but we did take it from Whaley's.
We did.
Yes, which was approved.
So Madam Chair, you'll have to, in the beginning, in local preference policy, it says to the maximum extent permitted by law. And if applicable, any federal or state financing or subsidy program supporting the development. So a local preference is always determined by the subsidy. So that language covers us.
Any other questions? Discussion? Oh, one question. So you did the presentation for us at town meeting. Have you gotten that far as to who would actually talk about the meat and the potatoes of this? Or are we just gonna say, we've got this bylaw, here it is, we just yes or no?
Yep, we have not addressed that.
Okay.
And we can deliberate among the working group.
After we go through the next month of roadshow, I'm sure we'll have a good idea how we want.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you've got some time on that, just wanted to ask. Okay.
Yep, another question.
Okay.
We need to address. Yes.
All right, any other questions? Do we have anything from staff? All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve this. Just a vote to submit this to the select board for the June 2025 special town meeting.
So moved.
Yeah, did you say you still wanted to review the clean version though? Oh, okay.
You're good? Yeah. I mean, there's still a public hearing. Okay. If anything comes up, we can change it then. But this is fine to go to the select board.
And that's all we're making a motion on.
Yeah, could I just ask that the motion note that it's also with the corrections of the section number of the last section? 404.8. 404.9. So very, very minor amendment.
As amended.
Okay. You have a second.
Given town council's recommendation, I was second.
Have a second. All right, any discussion? No, all right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you. Motion passed.
Big moment.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, no problem.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, motion passes. Well, that's okay.
Yeah. All right, does anybody have any liaison reports they wanted to talk about, anything about their committee?
Sidewalk, we don't meet again until May.
House Corner.
House Corners meeting again on May 13th. Don't know what we're gonna do. It's unclear to me that you can redesign House Corner in a materially different way that preserves some level of parking. My guess is there'll be some effort to make it more pedestrian friendly and lose a few spaces.
Conversation about buying any land.
There was a conversation about it very early on, and the suggestion was we thought that to be a non-starter. Well, the working group thought that the likelihood that the town would agree to buy through eminent domain significant sections of Hall's Corner was low.
Yeah.
It was one of the very first things that was discussed at the working group, and collectively, we came to the conclusion that we didn't think that we could.
What if it wasn't evident to me? What if a buyer said, I'd be willing to? I guess, like,
Why would you buy or sell?
maybe they don't want to have the land anymore.
Oh, no, you mean, what if an owner sold?
Yeah, what if an owner came to, sorry, what if an owner came to the town and said, okay, I heard you're looking for some parking spaces, I'd be willing to sell you this. Does that come up now?
That hasn't come up, and some of the properties along Hall's Corner, especially Stan Street, have been there for a long time, and I wonder what the opportunity would be to buy it. I can't imagine you can significantly redesign Hall's Corner without buying some of the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of them's a big gas station.
Right.
I think it'd be a tough. I mean, quite frankly, there's 20 years of studies.
Yeah.
There's 20 years, right, Rebecca?
Yeah, there's like 17 plans, I think we counted.
My goodness.
Yeah, it's. There's no action.
And so what the Hall's Corner Working Group tried to do was, let's do something that we can actually affect.
Yeah.
Let's try to do something, not even positive we'll get there. But
Anybody else?
that meeting is on May 13th.
All right, nothing much is going on with coastal resiliency. I think I mentioned previously, somebody on the committee, one of the volunteers submitted for 2 or 3 grants. So I'll know more. That's great. Anything from either, we know what you two have been up to. And then,
The House Trustee.
all right. Anybody else have anything else they wanted to bring up? All right, well, if that's it, if I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
Second, all right, meeting is closed. Thank you all.